such a time as this.
And welcome back to For Such a Time as This. I'm your host, Pastor James Pittman. I am here today with Don Veinot, president of Midwest Christian Outreach. I've known Don for years, and I find myself reading articles and saying, man, I don't have time to keep up with all these heresies and false teachers like whack-a-mole. You hit one and two others pop up. And so Don's ministry actually helps pastors and ministries that don't have the time to play whack-a-mole. He helps with Midwest Christian Outreach to keep a track on all these things. Thank you, Don. Can you please explain to people what is Midwest Christian Outreach?
Sure. Midwest Christian Outreach is a mission to cults and non-Christian religions. It grew out really of a desire to reach Jehovah's Witnesses. That's how we started out. And over time, it just sort of grew because we started getting calls about other groups along the way. And then at one point, we started getting calls about a particular teacher operating within the evangelical church that was teaching some things that concerned us greatly. And initially, we didn't want to deal with it because raising money as a missionary for a mission to non-Christian groups is easier than if you're picking on those who are perceived to be Christians. We always want to see the good guys and the bad guys. Good guys wear hats, bad guys are outside the church, wear black hats.
Yeah.
But we had a problem. We had to answer a question, which was, if we don't have the integrity to deal with false teachers in the church, doesn't that mean we give up the right to deal with false teachers outside the church? And so that's took us on a different sort of a trajectory.
Makes sense to me.
Well, it's important. And unfortunately, it does mean sometimes we're going to step on toes. We're going to, in fact, we did our live webcast today. You probably didn't catch that, but the topic was the pastor as apologist and apologist as pastor. Mm-hmm. And what we see really in the New Testament is a model of pastoral work that is defending the faith from false teachers that would creep in or would rise up from within, and training and equipping the saints to do the work of ministry. That's their job.
Yeah.
And we tend to miss that. So unfortunately, we have a lot of false teachers coming into the church through what we might call the good old boy network. We've got Christian publishers, pastors, churches that are doing things that seem to increase numbers that actually are heretical.
Yeah. So I was talking to Mr. Don Veinot here, and I asked him, what's the biggest thing going on in the church? And we came upon the topic, contemplative, if I'm saying that correct?
Yes.
Contemplative prayer. What is contemplative prayer for those of us who don't know?
Well, let's start out first and say that many who are advocating it are doing so from good motives.
Uh-huh.
So we want to detach motives from teaching.
Okay.
Very often you can be well-intentioned and do the wrong thing. And one of the things that's driving it is saying, we need to spend time praying. I absolutely agree. We need to spend time in the Word. Absolutely. I think that is pivotal to the Christian life and growth. Mm-hmm. And yet, the tools that they come up with to do that are not good tools because they don't come from a biblically centered or Christocentric worldview. They actually come from Roman Catholic and Buddhism worldview. That's the problem. Mm-hmm. Contemplative prayer. Let me give a quote. This is from the contemplativeoutreach.org, and this is how they define it. Mm-hmm. It is centering prayer is drawn from ancient practices of Christian contemplative heritage, notably the fathers and mothers of the desert.
That's the definition of contemplative prayer?
Yes. Notably the fathers and mothers of the desert, Lectio Divina, praying the scriptures, the cloud of unknowing, St. John of the Cross, and Teresa of Avila. It was distilled into a simple method of prayer in the 1970s by 3 Trappist monks. Now, what religion are Trappist monks?
What kind of monks?
Trappist monks.
I have no idea.
Roman
Trappist.
Catholic.
Roman Catholic.
Type of a Roman Catholic monk, right?
Okay.
It was distilled into a simple method of prayer in the 1970s by 3 Trappist monks. Father William Menninger, Father Basil Pennington, and Abbot Thomas Keating. Thomas Keating is someone many might be familiar with. He's a big advocate of it. And also Thomas Merton is another one. He's a Roman Catholic / Buddhist adherent. And we should add also that during the 20 years, 1961 to 1981, when Keating was abbot at St. Joseph's, held dialogues with Buddhist and Hindu representatives. So what contemplative prayer is a combination of Roman Catholic mysticism from the Desert Fathers, who starved themselves, lived in caves, secluded from everyone else, and had rapturous visions. Well, if I started myself, I might have a rapturous vision as well. And united to that then is Buddhism and Hinduism and Zen Buddhism.
Wow. So this might be obvious, but why is this so dangerous? Why is contemplative prayer? I think it may be self-evident, but what specifically and why specifically is it dangerous?
Well, some of the keys of it are that you want to think more and more about less and less so that you can empty your mind, and then God could pour things into you. It strikes me not as much different than Shirley MacLaine's New Ageism we find in Out on a Limb, where you think more and more about less and less until eventually you're always thinking about nothing. And I think she achieved that, actually.
Okay. So, she's not the only one, trust me.
Yeah. So that's a reason why this is dangerous. We are to meditate. That's true. The problem isn't the words. The problem is the definitions behind the words.
Yeah.
We are to meditate on something. Meditate on the Word of God. That's where we get our information from. We are to think on the Word of God, whatever is pure, whatever is honest, whatever is of good report. Think on these things. So we're supposed to think on something. In fact, even the Hebrew, the word for meditate is mumbling, repeating. It's an active doing something. In this case, doing something with what God has said.
Yep, we're called to meditate on the Word of God, and so while this emptying your mind to where it's nothing, that's obviously a practice that is picked up in Congress in Washington, D.C. That's obvious, the representatives and the lawmakers. How widespread is this? I mean, from what you're describing, the evangelical church should want to stay as far away as possible, but it seems like what you're saying is the evangelical church is embracing this nothingness.
It's not just embracing it; it's promoting it.
They're promoting it.
There are departments in Bible colleges devoted to, quote, spiritual disciplines, end quote. Now, when I talk about this, and someone asked me, I've had this discussion with my pastor, and you met my pastor, Dan Cox, great man of God, solid teacher. And as we've talked about this, he said, so are you opposed to spiritual disciplines? And I said, it depends on what you mean. Let's define our terminology. Be disciplined in meditating on the Word of God.
Correct.
Yes.
Yeah.
Should we be disciplined in praying without ceasing? Absolutely. Should we be disciplined in seeing the lost as genuinely lost so that we have a heart to reach them with the gospel? Yes. The question isn't should we be disciplined. The question is, what do you mean by spiritual discipline?
Correct.
When I was, as you know, I grew up as an atheist. Mm-hmm. So when I came to the faith, I was sort of a blank page of what does a Christian even do? How do you live this life out? And someone had told me, as you're praying, here's something that might help. It's just sort of a little checklist, let's say, that you should include into your prayer. But it is no more than that. It's just a checklist. Yeah. And they said, use ACTS, ACTS, adoration, confession, thanksgiving, supplication. So that kind of you remember, okay, you need to spend time remembering who God is. That's what adoration is. Just remembering He's the God of the universe. He created everything. He walked with us daily, right? Yeah. Confession. I am a sinner saved by grace. Yeah. And if I forget that, sometimes not sometimes, it always affects how I live my Christian life.
Yeah.
Thanksgiving, so that was helpful. This idea of thinking more and more about less and less so that I can become emptiness for God to fill is Hinduism, it's Buddhism, it's anything but Christian.
Anything but Christian, and I'm shocked how is that type of thinking infiltrating the church is mind-boggling to me. Last question, are you comfortable naming what institutions or people are pushing this type of thinking to warn people of who's pushing this type of
Sure.
type
You
of
have
stuff?
InterVarsity Press is a big promoter of it. They have at least 7 or 8 books written by someone by the name of Ruth Haley Barton.
That was shocking to me.
Yeah, Ruth Haley Barton
University.
had been on staff at Willow Creek Community Church, and so she advocated us here. And because she was at Willow Creek, that's like the imprimatur almost of seeker-sensitive evangelicalism. If it's Willow Creek, it's okay. So she came out of there. Her offices are in Wheaton College at the Marion, in Wheaton, Illinois, at the Marion Center. Now that has to tell you something.
Wait a minute, you saying Wheaton College has embraced this?
No. She's in Wheaton, Illinois.
Oh,
at the Marion Center in Wheaton, Illinois.
Marion Center. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, and she there's a nice labyrinth there, and so you can really get into the whole sort of a meditative, contemplative mindset.
Gotcha.
And as she teaches, she will use or maybe misuse Bible passages is a better way of framing that, and kind of making it about you rather than about who it is, which is Jesus. The stories in the Gospels are about Jesus. That's who they're about. They're not about us. So you got that. Willow Creek, of course, is a big advocate of contemplative prayer.
Really?
Yeah. So.
All right. Don Veinot from Midwest Christian Outreach. We're going to try to do this on a regular basis. Look and see what issues are facing the evangelical church and what topics and teachings we need to be aware of. Thank you, Don Veinot. We will see you soon here for such a time as this. Thanks, Don.
Blessings to you.
For such a time as this.